Hopefully second good take. Here we go. If an email is sent from one person to another via their computers, the pathway has to be like this. I'm going to do this as a primer. Your computer physically has an IP address, Internet Protocol address, and a MAC address. It's a machine identifier address associated with it for the hardware. You can change it and fake it, but let's just continue. And it can be dynamically associated, permanently associated, whatever. From your computer to the Wi-Fi box in the side of the wall, or to the router, or the modem as it's called, or whatever. It then goes out from wherever you are physically at, which it may have its own IP address and MAC address, and probably does, and communicates through the internet. We just call it the internet, the cloud, whatever. It probably goes through the internet service that is being paid for by you or whoever is running that connection. And then that service is then the next hop. So we have your computer, whatever equipment that you went through. It's going to be at least one other piece of machinery. And then the internet service provider, ISP. From there it goes into the internet itself. And it can bounce anywhere. It can bounce, in one case recently observed by me, to Dallas, Texas, to come back across the street. It's whatever pathway works. That's how the internet works. It was originally set up as being capable of surviving a nuclear war, and I'm literally not lying there. That was actually the joke about it. But anyway, it can bounce from one connection to another, and it probably will, dozens of them. And if you send an email or just communicate from your computer to Google, every time you do one of these communications, each of the stages can either forward that information or erase it and just communicate back and forth. So Google just thinks the internet service provider is watching YouTube and watching this video rather than you. Now, that information about your IP address and the other information is mandatory in order for communications to happen. This is like having a phone number and you call another phone. Although now you can do it without them, but you get the point. It's a lot like that. Okay, now, let's say you're going to use the internet not for sending an email or like a phone call, but to hack. All of these are the same thing. The internet just says it's traffic and used to treat it equally. But anyway, so let's say you're sitting somewhere totally not in Moscow, and you're going to break into the Democratic National Committee's location to steal their email, instead of physically walking in the building, sneaker netting, and just steal it, because that's easier. But let's just say you're literally not the Russians, you're in Slobovia. You claim to be Slobovian, damn it. So you do this hack and you get access to their email system, which is, it could be one or two computers or 100 of them. It could be just one acting like them. You don't know what you're getting into until you get into it, up to your neck. This email server, the email system, is a lot like Google doing Gmail. It's a machine that is doing email. It becomes an email server. Maybe that's what you broke into. Or maybe you just broke into a bunch of email accounts. See also the leak for the Democratic National Committee data. What was really broken into. Now, if you're sending an email yourself through your own email server, let's say you build a server. It goes from your computer with its IP address and MAC address, just say ID data from your computer, the ID data from your machine here, then it goes bouncing through the internet, how many layers, and then it ends up at the other person's computer. And this is this pathway. And it's called a header or metadata in the email. This is not really, it is metadata for an email, but it's not really the metadata you're looking for. But anyway, here we go. Now let's say you did that. You're communicating, you're a hacker, and you're blasting through the internet, and you're emailing and visiting, for some reason, social networking on the same machine, which a hacker wouldn't do unless they were extremely stupid, or it wasn't just one hacker and there was a lot of people doing stuff and one hand didn't know what the other was doing. But anyway, we might be able to determine if we got information from that, if it wasn't lied about or expunged halfway through so you didn't get all the data. The exact email client they're using, or whether they used a webmail page, or where they're located. So, one of the ways you can keep this from happening if you're the Uber hacker is to use a virtual private network or proxy. Some people call it firewall. That's not the same thing. Basically, you make it to where people cannot find your location because you appear to be over there. That's it. You can bounce around the net on purpose if you want to know how to do it. You got to look it up. It's hard to do. And route yourself any way you want to. Normally it does it itself. That's how it normally works. You can kind of tunnel through. That's what we call it. But normally you don't. You just go from here to here. You can also have a tunnel. And in between these stages, each of them can be encrypted or not encrypted. You can encrypt at your end and at the other end, and it'll get re-encrypted and de-encrypted halfway through hundreds of times over to make sure it's harder to track, or at least somebody can't eavesdrop. And when it goes through each of these machines, the machines have log files that record what happened. And it might include the entire header data. And if everything's encrypted from end-to-end encryption, all it records is something happened between that connection, and I funneled data back and forth. Paper shuffling. So here we go. During all of this, you're using encryption if you are, and it'll have certain pieces of information that make it stereotypically that machine is using encryption to that machine. So here we go. Guccifer, proper name, is the DNC hacker, right? Okay. And repeatedly say, I'm not a Russian, and I'm not in Russia. Communicated with journalists because got to keep the story alive and bring it up really, really quinkadinkly when somebody looks bad. A lot like what happens in this country. And is totally not against just one party. Totally a whistleblower, not doing propaganda or doing an open hangout. And decides to communicate with journalists through an AOL French account. And every time they check the headers, because the AOL emails aren't expunging any of it, or even trying to, they find it originates at an IP address for a machine in France at the IP address 95.130.15.34, port 1723, and then it includes PPTP. I've forgotten what PPTP is. I'm sorry. I'm not going to look it up. I'm already just doing the video here. And it's an AOL account going through Digicube SAS France as the stopping point. After that, it doesn't go any further back because the information is scrambled up or it's not available. So someone decided to look up some data about that. That IP address has a SSH fingerprint for part of the encryption pathway or something, or for authentication or whatever. And that number, that code, was also used by 7 other IP addresses as well. So that information meant that those 7 IP addresses were set up with the same very, very long, seemingly random number to do something. Could be a coinkydink, that's fine. Now, these 7 IP addresses were part of a range of other IP addresses that are not really part of our story here, that was assigned to an autonomous system named AS196689. One of the other IP addresses, one of the set that was discovered to be using that same code, SSH code, was 95.130.9.198. That's a different pattern. And this was hosted, it hosted a website. This website is vpn-service.us. Virtual private network for hiding your ass. And it was prefixed with FR1, which means it's the first one of the French set of VPN services.us to serve France, not to serve man. So anyway, yes, this is going to continue. Now that location, that domain name and everything were associated from February 2015 at that IP address. It originally was set up in 2004. Then somebody thought up the name and bought it. And its registration information was a username, Anton Harkov, from a movie character. So it's fake. And its name server, which is a piece of equipment somewhere out there that would maintain that domain name for them and continue distributing it so you could find it. Because you type in the domain name google.com, a name server somewhere one of Google's, actually sends you to an IP address for a machine, because the machines, that's how they identify themselves. They're not identified by names normally. Well, this domain name, which is for the VPN service in question, the domain name server would then shovel IP addresses for you to go look at. So you could rotate IP addresses, different machines. That's how the internet works. Google isn't just one computer, you know, so this is doing the same thing. Anyway, that domain name server was named xocma.net. XOCMA. So that one has its own domain name registration and organization data. A Moscow-based Azer, I can't pronounce it, TK Russian Telecom, LLC. Now this is all circumstantial. Okay. And it had the same phone number and an email support number, a name, ID code, that was the same as the one we're talking about here that's being used for hiding someone's butt. So it was owned by the same persons. Okay, now, none of this is really all that important. I mean, lots of stuff gets bought and sold over time. IP addresses sometimes have, accidentally, quinkadinkly, the same SSH fingerprint codes, or whatever you want to call it. And I was going to give you a link below to the thing that proved that, and so was the people who actually did this original analysis. But even though it's trivial, and it is, to archive that so you can have a backup copy, they didn't do it. And they're the ones who are giving this information out. So you didn't do step 0. So I'm calling that into question. But let's talk about what actually happened. Now remember, this person, this guccifer 2.0, was communicating with journalists and talking on social media. Because that's totally what you would do after making yourself public enemy number 1 of an entire political party in a foreign country where you've interfered with the election, because guccifer 2.0 did interfere with the election. You don't believe that? Stealing one side's emails, not the others? You really think that's not interfering with an election for a particular outcome? Okay, hold that thought. So anyway, and it's not the Russians, because this guccifer says, oh, I'm not a Russian, I'm from this country over here, you know, Slobovia or whatever, but can't speak Slobovian when they get him on a phone interview, and can't communicate by typing in a way that's consistent with that language at all. Totally believable. Okay, well, the VPN thing can be turned on and off because this idiot didn't leave it on perpetually on their machine. If you set up a machine to do a particular hack, and if you're going to maintain a persona, you have a separate machine for it, or at least a separate hard drive you plug into the machine that lies about everything and goes always in VPN mode, always tunneling. Well, Ditzelfritz turned it off once and posted something like on Facebook. So when, not if, some government somewhere subpoenaed that social network and said, give us all the data that you hide so people can't harass each other, they got an IP address that led to a location that's basically run by old KGB-style people who do propaganda in Russia, and that's it. It's literally, they own that IP address. Nobody's going to tunnel into it and try to make the Russians look bad, because they'd shoot them. This is a location where they would be doing this. They would be under a persona, a bunch of them doing it, maybe making mistakes like this. In this case, guccifer 2.0 was actually, literally, a Moscow GRU person. And they traced it to a specific person because they were able to do that partially. All because this individual had a machine where they could turn off the thing that was making it impossible to find them. Why the hell would you do that? Well, it's a setup, and no, the only persons who could set this up and do this would be the Russians. For once, actually, it is Russia. But just this once. And I'll include all the links below if you want to read it. And I'm still critical of the persons doing this, and I want the headers from that email and the other information from whoever it is or whatever it is they subpoenaed the data from. Until that's out, I'm going to hold my breath on this one. You should too. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck with that. And guccifer, make a special purpose machine. And if it's a bunch of you, get your shit together. Thanks.